we have been discussing, this entire business of outsourcing is on two things. Can I lower my cost? Can I get better quality from an outside agency? Right? That those are the two most important things. So the supply chain will benefit. The supply chain will benefit by outsourcing if the outsourced vendor, if the outsourced function, the outsourcing vendor can deliver the function at lower cost and can get it done at better quality. Right? Can get it done at better quality. So that is when everybody in the supply chain will benefit. Right now, when will the vendor be able to deliver higher quality? When will they will be able to deliver a higher quality when the third party agent is a specialist, right? When they are specialists. For example, the steering wheel manufacturer is a specialist because the only product that they may be making are steering wheels. They are not generalists, they are specialists who can operate at scale, right? Who can operate at scale. And therefore you can trust this guy, trust this agency to make good steering wheels for the car manufacturer. Now you are guaranteed of better quality because this agent knows his business. I know how to make steering wheels because that's all I do, and therefore you are guaranteeing high quality. You have a better chance of lowering your purchasing cost. If you are a car manufacturer, you have a better chance of lowering your purchasing cost because the steering wheel manufacturer is not operating at 3 lakh steering wheels per year. They are operating probably at 12 lakh steering wheels per year. 12 lakh square steering wheels per year, they will get economies of scale. If they get economies of scale, that particular vendor will charge you a lesser price. If they charge you lesser price, if you are a car manufacturer, your total cost of purchasing will be lower, and that is how you will benefit, right? You as a car manufacturer will benefit because you are getting things done at a higher quality at a lower cost because the steering wheel manufacturer is operating at scale. They are specialist, they will get better quality, right? Because they must have encountered all the problems and they would have solved all the problems, right? So most of the times, right, lower cost sometimes maybe because of location, right? Not most often, many times. I would say that I would not now say most often. It's a slightly stronger statement. For example, IT outsourcing to India, right? Apparel outsourcing to South Asia. Very initially, IT outsourcing happened because India was considered to be a market which has lesser labor cost. So cost of hiring an IT engineer in India was lesser than cost of hiring an IT engineer probably in the Western countries. And therefore, a lot of organizations in the Western markets decided to outsource their IT functions to India, right? So that is how the lower costs were derived. Now India has moved up the supply chain. We are not only doing low cost functions for the organizations, we are actually helping them with strategic functions, and therefore we have moved up the supply chain. But probably there is a debate about whether that has reduced the cost benefits that the organizations used to get earlier. Similarly, a lot of organizations get apparel manufactured from South Asian countries because the cost of labor is lesser there. So the lesser cost may not happen only because of the location. As I said earlier, the lesser cost may happen because of the scale at which they are operating, because that they have the expertise, and therefore they have optimized their processes. So because they have optimized their processes, they are getting better costs, right? And therefore they are able to offer very, very competitive prices. All this could lead to lower prices to the firm that is outsourcing the function. Okay. Once again, flipping between when will it work, when will it not work, right? So when will outsourcing not work? Outsourcing will not work when there is volume, right? For example, you are a car manufacturer and you are making 15 lakh cars every year. You are making 15 lakh cars per year. You want to make 15 lakh steering wheels. Now, if you create a separate department which manufactures steering wheels, they will have to operate at that scale that the vendor was operating. The steering wheel manufacturer outside was operating at 12 lakhs per year. Now you have decided to be very aggressive in the Indian market, and now you are going to say that I want to sell 15 lakh cars in India. So you will need 15 lakh steering wheels. So instead of giving a contract to the vendor who was operating at 12 lakhs, and what was the advantage of giving the contract to the vendor? Because the vendor was able to operate at scale and get scale economies. Now, if the production volumes are very, very large, then it is very unlikely that the vendor will generate economies of scale better than the firm. Right? The vendor, as I said in the hypothetical example, the vendor was operating at 12 lakh steering wheels. The firm has decided that they are going to operate at 15 lakh steering wheels. So the economies of, if you are thinking of economies of scale, the economies of scale will be with the firm because they are operating at a much larger scale. So if there are volumes, if the volumes are very, very large, you really have to think hard and decide whether you want to outsource or you want to do it in-house, because doing it in-house will give you the same economies of scale that you were hoping that the vendor will give you. Right? So higher volumes, really need to think outsourcing helps or doesn't help. Secondly, uncertainties. Earlier we spoke how losing control, right? You are not manufacturing the steering wheel, therefore you have no control over the steering wheel, right? So vendor manufactures it. If the uncertainty is going to be very high, right? If the uncertainty is going to be very high, right? If the uncertainty is going to be very high, then you really have to worry what is going to happen. For example, if requirements change over time, if requirements are going to change over time, then every time there is a change of requirement, you have to do a setup. Whereas the third party, they are accustomed to this. A third party can handle this kind of uncertainty very well, right? Third party will say, you are changing the requirement. That is as if I'm getting a new contract from another manufacturer. So the steering wheel manufacturer will say changing the requirement and getting the production changed, setup changed is no big deal for them because they are working at scale. So requirement change is an uncertainty that is handled better by the supplier rather than you. If you are worried about uncertainty because you are losing control, the steering wheel manufacturer is doing everything and you have less control, then probably outsourcing is not a good decision, right? So you really have to balance it out. Third place where the outsourcing may not work is what kind of resources are required. If you require very, very specific resources to get the function done, then you can hire the resources yourself rather than asking the vendor to hire the resources, right? Vendor is going to hire resources and charge you for it. Rather than that, you can hire the resources. For example, there is a very, very specific laser required to manufacture something, right? Let us say there is a very, very specific laser required. You don't have that laser. The vendor doesn't have that laser, right? So what's the point of outsourcing? The vendor is also going to subcontract it to somebody else and get the job done from that other place where there is a availability of the laser machine. You are going to also do it. Why don't you get the laser machine and get it done yourself? Or you can directly talk to the place which has the laser machine rather than your vendor subcontracting it to the third party, right? So those are cases, right? Specific resources. When the resources are very, very generic, when normal production setup will help, then outsourcing might help. When very specific resources are required, you really have to think whether outsourcing will help or doing it yourself will help. Okay, so what is the risk of using a third party for getting the function done? The first is, as I told you, you will lose control, right? You will not have contact with your customers. For example, you are not selling to your customers, you are giving it to the retailer and retailer sells it to the customer, right? Retailer will know about the consumer behavior more than you, right? The purchase behavior. When do they come? How much do they buy? What is the frequency at which they are buying? Are they buying when there is discount? Are they buying when there is a festival going on? Your retailer will know more about your customer than you will know, right? So whenever you are outsourcing functions, you will lose contact with your supply chain echelons. For example, if you are not if you are not doing the warehousing, right? If you have outsourced the warehousing function, if you outsource the warehousing function, you will not know what happens to the grain, right? You will not know how the grain is getting bad, whether the warehousing agent is doing it right. So essentially, you will lose contact with your product, with your customers. So that is the risk of outsourcing. Secondly, you will lose visibility, right? You will lose visibility, right? As I told you earlier, between me and my customer, there are 2 or 3 more agents that I have inserted, right? I decided not to sell it directly to the customer. I decided to sell it to the wholesaler. The wholesaler sells it to the retailer. Retailer sells it to the customer. Now I built these layers in the supply chain, and therefore I will lose visibility in the supply chain, right? I will not know what's happening in the supply chain because I am separated with other echelons by multiple layers, right? So therefore there is a loss of visibility. Since a lot of data is not with you, but it is with your vendors, with your suppliers, there is always the possibility of leakage of sensitive data or information. For example, for the steering wheel, now you have told the vendor that I want you to make the steering wheel with these specifications, very specific requirements, very specific design. Now what if the supplier loses the design, right? The design is stolen from the supplier. So that is a loss, right? That is a loss of sensitive data. That is leakage of sensitive data. If the steering wheel was getting manufactured in-house, the probability of this theft could have been prevented because you were in control. Now you are not in control, right? You are not in control, and therefore you don't know when the data may be vulnerable, when there are possibilities of hack and so on. Very regularly you read in newspapers that some consumer data was taken away, unauthorized access to the data and so on, right? Very often it happens, and there is a higher probability of that happening when your outsourcing agents are controlling the data rather than you control the data. That is a risk. Another risk is introducing a supply chain agent when the supply chain itself is broken, right? You know that supply chain is broken, you are adding one more agent to it, it will be even more broken, right? It will only make things worse, right? So you know that the retailer is not following the contract. For example, you have given the contract to the retailer to sell it for you. Retailer is not doing the job, and then you say, I will introduce a wholesaler. How do you hope that the wholesaler will bring in any more control, right? You are not able to control the retailer. How can you think that the wholesaler will be able to control the retailer? So if the supply chain is broken, it is first better to fix the supply chain rather than introduce a third party into the broken supply chain. Okay. Another problem is if you add more and more agents in the supply chain, the cost of coordination goes up, right? Now you have to coordinate with multiple agents. Oh, I have a transportation partner. Rather than getting a truck organized, if the truck was in my factory, I can simply ask the truck driver to come and pick up the raw material and deliver it to my retailer. Now the cost of coordination increases because I have a supply chain partner, right? There is one more echelon in the supply chain, and therefore the cost goes up. So typically people underestimate this total cost, which has to be included, right? You may get the products cheaper from your supplier, but if that increases your cost of coordination, then what good is the benefit, right? Whatever you are benefiting because of lesser price, you are losing because of cost of coordination. Okay. Now that is a risk of having a outsourcing agent help us. The other thing that may happen is you will lose the capability, right? Earlier, let us say that you were manufacturing the steering wheels, and now you have given it to a third party. Now the third party, anyway, those guys were specialists in designing the steering wheels, so they were able to manufacture the steering wheels and get it done. But that essentially means that 5 years from today, you won't have any idea how to make a steering wheel because you have stopped making it for 5 years. Since you stopped making the steering wheel for 5 years, probably all the department, the machines that you had created for manufacturing the steering wheels in-house, you dismantled it. you dismantle it, and therefore now you are not able to manufacture the steering wheel in-house even if you want to. At the same time, in the 5 years, the outsourcing agent, right, who is now manufacturing the steering wheel for you, has become bigger, better, right? So do you want to do this? Do you want to lose the capability in-house and let the supplier grow, right? Sometimes it is good, sometimes it may not be good. There are examples where people have gotten into trouble because the supplier became too strong. There are lots of case studies of that kind, right? So all those issues have to be considered. So those are essentially the risks of getting things done outside. Okay. Now I just want to highlight two terms are used very often in the industry. Those are called 3PL and 4PL, third party or fourth party logistics. 3PL is third party logistics providers. They perform some of the logistics functions like flow of product, information, funds, right? That can be performed by the firm itself. Can be performed by the firm, but it is given to a outsourcing partner, and those partners are called third party logistics partners. So 3PL is a term that is very commonly used. 4PL, fourth party logistics. Fourth party logistics also designs. Okay, also designs. Design was not included here, whereas design and building actually is included here. Okay, a 4PL logistics partner can actually help you in designing also. So the steering wheel that you were earlier thinking about, you do the design and you give the requirement to the to your manufacturing partner. Then you say, I don't even want to design. I will get another agent who will design, and then the designing agent will get the product manufactured either by themselves, or they will outsource it to a manufacturing person who will then manufacturing it for you. Right. So that is called 4PL. So 3PL, 4PL are essentially the echelons. Right. You are always one. Right. Echelon 1. You, the firm, the automobile manufacturer. Right. 3PL, 4PL are essentially the echelons in the supply chain. Now the question is, what is 2? Right? Think about it. I'll tell you at the end of it. The last thing that we had earlier referred to was contracts. Right? Once the vendors are finalized, we have to make sure that we design really awesome mistake proof contracts. Right? So there is no chance of error on either side. This contract design, I told you, is a very strong field now, an independent field in itself. So what is contract? Contract is essentially a formal agreement between two parties. Right? So essentially very formal agreement between the two parties. And there are various kinds of supply chain contracts. For example, there is something called buyback contract. So buyback contract usually happens between you and your retailer. So you say that, well, I'm sending you 100 products, so why don't you sell 100 products for me? And the retailer is able to say, retailer comes back to you and says, hey, I'm able to sell only 67 products. A buyback contract will help the retailer to send the 33 products back to you. She was able to sell only 67 products. You send 100 products. So the 33 products are not anymore, they are not useful to the retailer because she is not able to sell. She is able to sell only 67. So what is she going to do with the remaining 33 products? She will send the products back to you. So that is called a buyback contract. You buy the products back from the retailer. Sometimes you share what is called as revenue sharing contract. Revenue sharing contract is you tell the retailer that here I will send you 100 products. You sell the products, and whatever revenue you generate, we will share the revenues. Right? So let us say that the retailer is able to sell the product for 100 rupees every product, and there are 100 such products to be sold. Then you sign a revenue sharing contract with your retailer and say that you are generating a revenue of 100 rupees per product you are selling. You keep 75, give me 25. Right? That is an example of a revenue sharing contract. Not only these two contracts are very popular, therefore they are highlighted there. There are many such contracts. There are many such mechanisms through which the coordination can be achieved. But contract design is a very important aspect of this whole management of outsourcing function. Okay, so we will end the session here, and get into the topic of vendor selection, right? So there we are going to say that I have a set of vendors. These vendors have some properties. Let me cluster them. Let me group them together to understand which vendors are similar, which vendors are dissimilar. Do I want to give the contract to similar vendors? Do I want to give contract to dissimilar vendors? Essentially, some kind of vendor clustering is what we will do next. Okay, I'm ending the session here. Thank you.